What is going on, everybody? My name is TheDizzyViper and welcome back to this tutorial. It's been quite a while since I've done my last tutorial, I know. I've uploaded a couple of streams, but the last tutorial is like, I think 3 months ago? Quite a while, we gotta change that now. And I have a very special tutorial for you today. As you can see from the title, I'm gonna show you 5 easy tricks to make your renders look better. I'm saying easy because you can simply use these tricks today, and you should, because these tricks are gonna make your renders look sick. But before I start the video, please follow me on Instagram and Twitch, because I stream on Twitch twice a week where you can see my full process of working, and follow me on Instagram for daily updates, daily renders, and yeah, pretty much everything else. And also join the Discord down in the description below. We have a huge community of over 500 members. We share each other's experiences and knowledges. It's a very nice Discord server, so please join it. So first on our list we have fake lighting. So what is fake lighting? So fake lighting essentially is you create a realistic looking lighting with a very unrealistic light setup. And what that means is, for example, if you have an HDRI setup with a daylight or something like that, for example, like in this image. So this image might look quite realistic, but if you look at the light setup, I have used an HDRI, by the way, credit to Patrick4D for the amazing HDRI kit. I've used an HDRI and then an area light as well to get some more details triggered. Now, here's the reason why I did this. If the area light would have been turned off, my tire right at the left on the car would not have as much detail as it has with the area light. So the area light is basically an invisible or impractical light outside of the camera. It pretty much shines onto the car tire to make the tire look a little bit better and really get the maximum out of my tire shader. By the way, you can get the tire shader on Gumroad today, link in the description. So essentially what fake lighting does, it triggers detail that shouldn't be visible with the visible lighting. Then that was difficult to say. But be careful with this fake lighting because you have to make it look believable. If your color or your intensity or your temperature of your area light or any other light source that you use as a fake light source is off in, like I said, colors, intensity or temperature, the image can look very, very weird very quickly, and you can see it right here. If I put the intensity up, it looks totally wrong. That's why I'm saying be very careful with it and play a little bit around with the values and you'll get there very quickly. And the second one on the list is backlighting. So backlighting essentially is when your light source is between your scene and your camera, pointing at the camera and at the scene. So in my opinion, if your light source is anywhere in this area right here, compared to your camera and your scene, it counts as backlighting. And what backlighting does, it pushes your shadows, makes your bumps and displacements more visible, also pushes some reflections, and altogether adds a lot of contrast and depth to your scene. So as you can see right here, I have a sand material from Quixel. If I put a frontal lighting into this scene, the image becomes very, very flat and all my displacements and bumps almost disappear. Whereas if I put a backlighting into the scene, all of a sudden my image gains a lot of depth and contrast. The same thing goes for plants, for example. If you have plants that let light shine through, such as with a translucency map on this Quixel plants, for example, adding frontal light to the scene will obviously make your object visible, but add a few reflections at best. Whereas if you put a backlight on it, you can see the transmission really coming through to these plants and light shining through the leaves and making it truly beautiful. And in addition to that, since all the leaves are randomly rotated, you even get a few reflections out of it as well. So that's a win-win right here. So essentially using backlighting, you can get the most out of your assets and add a lot of depth and contrast to your scene with one simple light source. Which brings me to my next point, contrast. Obviously, backlighting is one way of adding contrast, but there are a lot of more ways to add contrast. You can do that, for example, by putting certain objects between your light source and your scene to create some shadows on the ground, basically creating a contrast between light and shadow. Or, for example, use a large area light behind your main object, which maybe you want the area light to be invisible to get a really nice outline. Creating a notable seam between the main object and the rest of the scene. For example, like I have in this image right here. Basically what I have here is a large area light behind my character, but I made the area light invisible to the camera, so you still have a black background, but a very, very strong white outline on your character to make it very distinguishable from the background. Another way of adding contrast is with colors. For example, Using complementary colors is probably the easiest way to add contrast using colors, for example blue and orange, green and red. If you use the right tones, they fit very well together, like you can see in these couple of images. They also add a lot of contrast and distinguishable scene between foreground and background at the very first glance of the image. The next thing on the list is shaders. And that is, in my opinion, one of the most important things on this list, because you can have an amazing lighting, you can have amazing object positioning. If your shaders don't look good, you can use the best lighting in the world and your scene will still not look the best it can. A good example for it is right here. Now, I always use Spastic Mouse's car shader or Rate Zero's Carpaint shaders for my car renders. Now watch me use the exact same scene with the exact same lighting setup, but with different Carpaint shaders. So we have this beautiful McLaren 600 LT right here with a Carpaint shader, or a Carpaint Controller rather, by Spastic Mouse, which you can get in the description down below, as well as the Rate Zero Carpaint shader. Now look how beautiful and realistic this Carpaint shader looks, and that is due to its layers. So these Carpaint shaders are built up just like real Carpaint, so paint, flakes, and coating. Now look if I just use a normal glossy material. Exactly. I mean, it doesn't look super bad, but it's definitely not a Carpaint, it's just a glossy material. And if you ask me, with the Carpaint, it looks a million times more realistic. The same thing goes for other materials. For example, here I have a couple of textures and materials from RDTextures, or Real Displacement Textures, also links in the description down below. Now look if I only use the rock diffuse map or the rock normal map on my material. It adds a little bit of lighting to it, but not too much. But if I use all the channels needed, such as diffuse, specular, roughness, normal, displacement, and maybe even an opacity map depending on what kind of material you're using, look how insanely good these materials can look and these shaders can look. Obviously, using textures is not equal to building shaders, because you pretty much just put the textures inside of the channels, but it's a very easy way to build shaders. A better example of actually building a shader is tire shaders, for example. That's pretty much what I know how to do. So if you look at my TheDizzyViper car tire shader, there are a lot of different noises and specular materials and roughness maps that I painted in Photoshop specifically for this tire shader. Obviously you can also use different roughness maps to create different looks, but I basically did this to create unevenness on my rubber surface, which, by the way, rubber is also quite difficult material to create in my opinion, because I initially always thought it's just a black material with a high specular and a low index and a high roughness, that's about it, but that's not quite true. There are a lot of different factors going into this, such as, like I said, different roughnesses, different speculars, different indexes, and you have to get these values all right in order to make your shaders look great. And the way you do this, or in my opinion you should do it, sit in front of your computer and mess around for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, wherever it takes, obviously if you have the time. Trying it out and seeing what the different faders, what the different sliders, what different nodes do, really helps understand how to build shaders. And not only for one specific shader, but it helps you understand and problem solve every other shader, or pretty much every other shader that you can think of later on. And last but not least, we have positioning. And what I mean by that is camera positioning in relation to the objects, or background objects in relation to the main object, or positioning your objects so your lighting looks better, just like I said in the beginning, adding a tree somewhere to get shadows. For example, if you have a scene just like here with a camera that is slightly tilted, slightly off center, and then you have an object or a scene where your main object should be clearly in the middle of the scene, it can be a real needle to the eye if it's off by a couple of inches. It is very weird, and obviously it can also be a style method, this little asymmetrical look, but then you have to make it right. On the other hand, for example, what you can use is the golden ratio or the Fibonacci spiral, which can help you distinguish where to put your objects in order to make the image either more eye-catching or also just lead the viewer through your image, which the Fibonacci spiral is for. In Cinema 4D and Octane, you can use those by clicking on your camera and then going into composition and just turning on, for example, golden ratio or Fibonacci spiral, crosshair, whatever, or grid. And it will show you that inside your camera, and you can place your objects according to those helping lines. The same thing goes for the focal length and the depth of field inside your camera. These two factors can really make an image look outstandingly good. Not in the terms of lighting, of course, but for example, here I have the same exact scene with the right focal length and, in my opinion, the right depth of field. And then I have the same scene again with a different focal length and no depth of field. It does look the same lighting wise, but the camera looks just a little bit off, and it doesn't give me this artsy feel that it should have, in my opinion. Like I said, focal length is something that you also have to play around with, as well as the depth of field. And the reason I'm mentioning depth of field is because it's something very delicate, meaning depth of field can very quickly decide between how big your scene will look. For example, if you use a big scene but with a very high depth of field and a very big portion of the screen taken over by depth of field, your scene will look very small all of a sudden. It will look like a macro shot. Whereas, for example, if you want to have a very small scene and you don't use a very strong depth of field, it will make the scene look very big. So that's why I'm saying depth of field, be careful with it. It's very delicate, but it can improve your image by a lot. So that was the 5 tips on how to make your images look better. If you have any more tips that you would like to add, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below. I'm sure everybody is very thankful for it. At the end of the video, I would like to redirect again to my Discord channel if you have any more questions, or just in general would like to join the community. We have over 500 members and incredible community, very helpful. Also, in the beginning of my Twitch streams, I would always review my viewers' artworks, and you can submit yours by just posting it into the stream art review channel on my Discord. So with that being said, that was the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and like, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.